Hello, everybody. My name is Parker Hartzler. I'm a senior technical artist working at Harakka Studios. We are working on this awesome game that I get to showcase to you today. It's called Tunes. It's spelled TUN35 because he's a robot. Obviously, he has a strange name and a strange ID number to go along with him. And yeah, I wanted to cover a bunch of awesome little niche educational bits in Unreal because there are a lot of problems that you can run into that aren't frequently really talked about, and I'm really happy to help with that. But yeah, cool. So I wanted to cover a bunch of stuff with this game and this project that we've been working on. We have like an open world style map in front of us here, and the idea behind Tunes, like I guess I'll give a bit of lore drop or whatever before we throw you into this environment here. But basically, Tunes is a robot that lives on this alien planet. And the lore is that essentially like humans came here and planted a bunch of like sci-fi robots and excavation equipment. Essentially, they're mining this planet for crystals that are extremely valuable. And those crystals are essentially the primary power source, and this planet's core is loaded with it. I'm actually going to pull out here, and I'm going to fly over to the other section of the map just to show you, because there's a big rift inside of the map where it shows you what the crystals look like. Underneath the surface, we have a bunch of glowing, magically colored crystals, essentially. And these are all like the main like power source or whatever, the main reason why the humans dropped off these robots. But lo and behold, though, Tunes has been living here. Everything's been going fine until recently a meteor came by, and it left these massive craters and, kind of like ruined all of the buildings and killed a bunch of robots. Tunes is mostly alone in this world, and all of the robots are now derelict, defunct, broken, collapsed, and it's kind of given the Wall-E vibe where he's like alone on the planet or whatever, and there's just a few other things around that barely have a little bit of life going on for them. But yeah, we had a bunch of interesting, issues that we wanted to like work on in terms of performance, and we picked and chose our battles in terms of that. So like the first thing I can think about that I always like talk about is I always like to encourage people to try to use a masked material wherever possible. So like these smokestacks that I have here, these are flip books that play in a material. I'll actually open up the material for us because this is educational content and we want to see absolutely everything that's going on and stuff like that. The material that is referenced, like the master material for this, actually comes from Fluid Ninja Live, specifically Fluid Ninja's flipbooks. It's offline flipbook creation software, which is really cool. It basically is like an Unreal Engine project that you open and then you use it to create different flipbooks with the fluid simulation and everything like that. But these materials have a bunch of awesome parameters. So like I just tell it what the layout is of our flipbook. I have 7 horizontal, 6 vertical, and then I can interpolate the velocity on this so that we have a nice smooth transition between all of the frames, and it's not all this like tick 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 low frame rate stuff, which is fantastic. And originally we did have a bunch of these as all translucent planes, but the issue is that if you have this on a translucent plane, I'm going to open up one of the. Oh, I need to open. I hit it. It's in. I hit it. Basically, I wanted to show you that this material is a lot more performant than the other materials. For example, if we pull this up and go to optimization view modes, shader complexity, we can see a bunch of shader complexity within our scene. I'm showing you absolutely everything raw, and you can tell that I actually have a lot of materials in here that go into browns and even reds in a lot of some cases, right? There were certain props where we wanted like higher detail, and in general we wanted a really complex material that could also save us a ton of time. We do a bunch of triplanar projection in our materials, and we do that inside of Unreal. Like rather than doing like Substance Painter, because then obviously you can't control like the final like resolution if you need to scale that object up to make it absolutely massive. But you can see that the benefit of having these as masked materials is that all of this, like if you make it a masked material, it's only where the the object is actually visible, that it is emitting something. But if you have these as translucent planes, it does this thing where, like, for example, these arrows are translucent, and you can see if I stack them behind one another, they become even more problematic. So if you have three of them overlapping at once, it becomes really, really intense. Like, it gets to the whites and really, really high end of your shader complexity, which is really raunchy. So we picked and chose our battles in the sense that we were like, well, we want to have a bunch of these like cool smokestacks coming off of like the rubble and the pieces of the meteor or whatever, but we really need to keep performance in mind. We want this to run on Steam Deck. So I specifically chose the column of smoke that comes from the factory, which is like the final destination that you're going towards on the map. The whole goal of it is to get to this green beam here, essentially. And it has these like big, like, nuclear smokestacks in the back that are emitting this awful pollution, which the sky itself is a unique color as it is an atmosphere. Who knows what the strange gases are going on up there, right? But yeah, we made this specific mesh translucent just because we figured that it would be nice to have because it's very pretty and we want it to be the main focal point. And then also there's like one other one, actually. This is really unique over here because this is not a translucent plane. I love working with some of the more experimental features on Unreal, but this is actually a heterogeneous volume, which is a new Unreal Engine 5 rendering feature. And these, obviously, because anything that's new, you really want to be careful with stuff like that, right? It comes with its own suite of like needing to, like, how do we optimize that, right? Like, how do we keep performance in mind? Well, in the case of heterogeneous volumes, the great thing about them is that you can dictate the volume resolution on them. Normally, these are actually set to 256, but for these ones on the building, we lowered each of these to 128. And because having resolutions ends up being like an exponential thing, right? Like a 4 times multiplier. 128 was perfect, but even 64 doesn't look that bad. Like, you can see the smoke quality right here. If I drop this to 64 on all of them, you can see the smoke still holds up pretty darn good, and everything still looks like you would kind of expect it to. So if you need to continue boosting performance out of heterogeneous volumes, which, again, be very cautious adding them to your scene. They are expensive, and where you use them, you should be really cautious of, because they can add several milliseconds to your frame rate. And the only other place I think we have it actually is on the character himself. Fluid Ninja has this awesome update where they essentially added feedback into the heterogeneous volume, so you can simulate the Fluid Ninja with a heterogeneous volume. So we have a smoke trail that follows our character in the scene once he loads in here, and we'll scoot him around here so you can see. And then I'll show you some of the awesome things that we did to animate things in this and get cutscenes running and things like that, and level sequences, because those are my favorite. I love to talk about level sequences because they're so powerful. But yeah, so if I scoot around, you can see behind Toons, there's all of this like smoke essentially that gets thrown around him and shoots all over the place, which is really cool. But that's a heterogeneous volume, and those volume resolutions need to be dialed down in their intensities, of course. But the way we approach this is we really wanted to find a way to texture a lot of this without having to rely on baked maps and the labor behind hand painting a bunch of assets and making sure all the bakes are perfect. So these are just kit bashes of like various pieces of like mid-poly geometry that I found on various different like online places like Gumroad and ArtStation and all these different places. And if I open, I'd love to show wireframe, because you can tell we have pretty dense geometry. Like the mid-poly geometry goes pretty dense, but because we're using Nanite on a lot of this stuff, it ends up being perfect. Like mid-poly is like the happiest thing that you can possibly feed Nanite, right? So if I give us our debug mode on Nanite, you can see, there we go. We've got all of our Nanite triangles rendering in the scene, and they only populate and get relevant once you move your camera really close to the mesh, which is just beautiful. There's also a lot of discussion. I'd actually like to touch base on this because this is interesting. There's a lot of discussion online that Nanite tanks your performance and like kills your performance and things like that. Oh, sorry about that. A little alarm on the side. It's not so simple as turning on Nanite kills your performance. It's based on what you're working with, right? So like if all of your meshes are really low poly And specifically, if a lot of your meshes are like the old school style of foliage, right, where you have like tree cards, like tree planes overlapping with one another, those are not made for Nanite, right? Like if you have a bunch of planes overlapping with one another and now they need to draw over top of themselves in Nanite, it creates there's another visualization for that actually. It's overdraw here. There we go. Perfect. You can see all of the areas that end up being orange is where Nanite's going, okay, like we're rendering like multiple things over top of one another. And this density and this effect really compounds when you have things like those planes and masked materials, which again, masked materials are fantastic and they're very performant. But if you make that mesh Nanite, you end up shooting yourself in the foot because it ends up, it's not geometry that is destined for Nanite. It's made for low poly LODs and that sort of thing. And Nanite works best on opaque objects primarily. You don't want to do it very often. Although with 5.7, very excited to see voxelized foliage and all that stuff. Really cool performance stuff coming around the corner. But I digress. Just wanted to touch on that a little bit because I feel like it's very relevant. But yeah, so enough of me blabbering about performance and the way that we sort of like try to save on time by like, doing triplanar textures and everything like that and using Nanite geometry and like not worrying about reducing. Well, let me bring you over here to one of our first cutscenes in the game. So there's this moment here where you get to this bridge, and this bridge has a little beacon here. I'll actually just walk right up to it, and the game will show you what it wants you to do. And once we put the box on the little platform there, it will trigger a level sequence, and I'll show you what that level sequence looks like because I want to emphasize how powerful they are in the sense that like cutscenes don't have to just be cutscenes either. I may take control of the camera when I play these cutscenes, and that's what cutscenes do typically. They rip away camera control and show you something specific. But these level sequences and these cutscenes are great to leverage different animated properties. In this specific instance, I'm just using it to pan around the camera, show the player like, hey, this box probably belongs over there, point A, point B. So I walk over to this, I click the button. Oh, there we go. I was like, did we have our bug fix for that? There we go. We're good. We're going to place this down over here, and then the cutscene will trigger where we activate this light bridge. And that whole light bridge coming into existence, obviously, it wasn't there before this cutscene happened. Like you can use these level sequences to reveal and then unreveal geometry that normally isn't there, which is already really cool. But the material on this light bridge, instead of animating it with something like a blueprint timeline, it's super powerful to do something like this inside of Level Sequencer because you can just key 2 parameters and watch it live feedback to you, and it's great. Oh, that's the narrative trigger. I need to do the trigger when we hit the box here, which I believe is cutscene, I think, level sequence. There we go. Play level sequence. Factory. It's this guy, right? Light bridge. There we go. Perfect. So this cutscene, this level sequence, has very simple stuff in it. It's just grabbing. Hello. There we go. Grabbing the light bridge blueprint, and then inside of that blueprint, there is material that I keyed in here, right? Oh, that's the event, actually. My bad. So in this circumstance, I used something called an event. My bad. I thought I keyed a material parameter, which is also, there's another example where I'll show where we use that. But if I open this little event, level sequence can do a lot more communicating than I think a lot of people give it credit for because of these events that you can launch. You can essentially launch a custom event at any point in a level sequence by adding, you go to add, and then event track, and then trigger. That's what this green track here is that it created. And then you key something, and then it will create a custom event that you can essentially see. The target also is very relevant here because you're like, okay, what blueprint do we want this custom event to communicate to? Like what object or whatever, right? Like that's something that needs to be defined, so it goes in there. And then we pulled off from this sequence event open light bridge anim. And so if we click here, it goes and it opens our light bridge blueprint. And sure enough, there's a custom event that comes in here and it tells this dynamic material instance, okay, start your thing, set it, create that dynamic material instance, and now play this sound of the bridge activating. There's timelines. So you can launch timelines from within it like this. Or another method to do this stuff, right, is I could come into here if I wanted to, and I could go light bridge, and I could go, okay, let's edit your material. We have here material parameter, light bridge M. And then now I can view the parameters that exist on the material of my object. And in this case, I can just go to opacity. I now have a specific keying track for opacity. And if I come over here, instead of doing this this through custom event, which I did this because my coworker set up a bunch of beautiful work with like the audio and everything like that, and it ended up being easier. But even easier for most people is just to use these keys inside of level sequencer, and you can essentially oh, sorry, I don't think it's actually on right now because of the fact that it didn't pass the custom event, so it doesn't know that it exists here yet. 1 second, I know what I can do. I can demonstrate this really quickly by just going to the light bridge, sorry, my bad, going to the light bridge mesh here and just adding it manually. Bridge. This is the mesh called light bridge underscore S. Anything? Oh, that's why. Sorry, there was a filter there at the bottom for levels only. Okay, cool. So there's the mesh. I'm going to drag it in to the level sequence, and then I'll bring him to be the same transforms as our blueprint. I'm just going over here, copying translation, coming over to our mesh, pasting. So now, beautiful. Our light bridge is here, right? It's obviously not the correct scale and orientation, but I wanted to do this just to prove the point of editing materials inside of the level sequence here. So come in here, static mesh, material, light bridge, and then opacity. So if I wanted to, I could have this begin at 0 and then just key another mark there and then 1. And then it gets this beautiful fade that happens. And the great thing about working inside of level sequencer, and the reason why I encourage it so much and why it's so powerful, is you can iterate very easily, like very, very easily. Like timelines is a bunch of compiling, saving, playing, checking, compiling, saving, playing, checking. It's the nature of just needing things to run through Blueprint. But level sequence is great because you can get it to just do a song and dance with just tapping a few keys, and it ends up being amazing. So I love it for simple stuff like this. I'll go show another specific cutscene and the way we use like VFX to like trigger. So over here, when we place the cube to get into the factory, I have these some VFX that'll play essentially right here, like steam and stuff like coming out of the door. So I'm going to grab the play level sequence with the factor. There we go. And I'll just play it from here inside of the level sequence rather than doing gameplay. But you can see I have a few of these Niagara systems that I've added in. And basically these Niagara systems are very similar to actually our smokestacks. They're just flip books that I made with Fluid Ninja, and I'm playing them with a Niagara asset inside of the level sequence. So if I hit play, you'll watch the door will go up, and you'll see a bunch of smoke and steam happen. So we'll hit play, and then boom, all that smoke and steam just goes, tsh, and then the door goes up. All of this is really handy because like. And also another thing, right? I wanted this door just by the nature of things, and like it was more convenient for, like you can see here, if the door was to go straight up, you would see it in front of the window, essentially, right? So I needed the door to go back and up, which also kind of gives it a good vibe, right? Like that sci-fi hydraulics, like first it kind of like nestles into like a different space and then it lifts and things like that. That kind of like, you know, minutia of movement or whatever, trying to prototype that in like a blueprint with like timeline and you know, going back and forth and seeing what that looks like can just take a long time. And so like the animation brevity, the convenience of all of this is just like absolutely massive and cannot be understated. So yeah, that's really powerful. And I think the next thing I want to touch on is there's a few really niche issues that can run into things. The first of which I'd love to touch on is something that not a lot of people realize. So I actually, I am due to update this specific area of the factory for one specific reason. We use triplanar and local projected, like I was mentioning, materials like tilables, and we don't have anything baked onto it. So these are all materials that like have like really like dense like tiling on them, and they are being projected in triplanar space, right? So like no matter what side of the model or whatever, you get this like perfect wrap of like triplanar trying to do its thing, and it's really apparent on like rounded edges and things like that, right? So like these are even triplanar. The issue that no one really talks about with triplanar materials and textures like that is it can actually break if the scale of your model, and this is very silly to me, if the scale of the model is less than 1, I think it is. Yeah, here we go. So this model over here, or if it's like below, like 1 or below. So like this model here, you can see we have this string here on like the side. But if I was to bring this model up to 2 in all of dimensions, and I pull back, now all of a sudden, my triplanar texture is fixed and there's no stretching going on anymore. It's this really strange issue that Unreal has where when it looks at a triplanar texture, it wants your object to be above a certain scale and then it starts to process it. So if the incredibly small in scale, like 1, this issue begins to become more and more apparent. Like if I shrink this guy and I keep shrinking him and I bring him all the way over here, you'll see that the stretching will get even worse and other textures will start to stretch as well. Like if I keep shrinking. Thankfully the other ones are holding out pretty well for some reason, but but yeah, there's these little niche issues, right? Where it's just like, why is my object doing this? I want to know why my materials are stretching. I know the material works appropriately. It's not you, it's just Unreal Engine being very strange. So that's a weird niche issue. The other niche issue we encountered was because we have an open world here, and sorry, forgive me, my engine's just having a moment because I wanted to save something and I told it no. So our landscape uses world composition, and we use runtime virtual textures for our landscape, which is the standard and is very useful because of the fact that you can blend the landscape material with the bottoms of objects and things like that, which is just huge. Like that's a huge win for like some visual quality. The landscape, when you build HLODs for it, there's this really unique issue where only after like Unreal Engine 5.4 and things like that, virtual textures, when they're used in your landscape and you go to build HLODs, it doesn't like having both of those things at once. Like it wants you to completely remove virtual textures, specifically like a lot of places online said, oh, just disable virtual textures for your project and then bake out your HLODs and you're good. We tried that. We still had the same bug. We were very confused. It turns out that inside of the material, I wish I could show you. I apologize. We currently have a loading bar because sometimes this map likes to reload itself when I do a save or prompt it with a save. The runtime virtual texture node inside of the material needed to be like unhooked completely. So we literally had to create a secondary landscape material that's just made for baking, nothing else. And it's the same. It just has the runtime virtual texture part removed from the material. Like that node does not get referenced. It does not see itself go through the chain of noodles in the material. And then we baked it. And then we had the HLODs work, and then we turned back on virtual textures, and then we put our landscape material back on, and then everything worked fine. And we were like, wow, that's a really weird niche issue. And it ended up being like weeks of back and forth of being like, what is causing this or whatever. And yeah, finding different ways to maneuver around these issues and these different like optimization things that can really, come out of left field and grab you are super important in Unreal because they can come in lots of different shapes and sizes. Fantastic. My engine loaded back in and we're good again.
It is really interesting because I guess sometimes when people run into issues, it can be sort of like a stress out. They're sort of like, what do I do? And you've presented so many like just very particular solutions to problems. And I think that's something that everyone can really take note of and learn from. And it's also interesting how you used sort of newer features, and you were super selective about how you used them. I feel like that's a really important, design philosophy, just in general, because you always need to save memory, right? But sort of, yeah, adopting a new tool, and just sort of, it's almost like you're experimenting with it. Like you're just like, let's try this out.
100%.
Let's see how this works over here and and just enough just so we can see the effect of it, but it's not going to tank our whole project if it doesn't work. Is that right?
Exactly. That's right. Like, and we were able to get a beat on that relatively early just by like stress testing things in a way where like we want, like, because like when I created the scene, I was aiming for like, okay, what's the most beautiful, highest quality thing that I can do for it? And I ended up having all of these smokestacks originally be heterogeneous volumes. And the other like lead developer was like, hey, like when I look at the scene compilation time or whatever, like the stat GPU, there's a bunch of like several milliseconds on the heterogeneous volumes. And I went, oh, they are like way more intense than I thought. And then only when I kept it to just one or two in the scene and then like really reduce their volume or whatever did I actually see the frame rate or whatever, the trade-off be worth it, essentially, right? Because that's the song and dance of making these games and these projects is like, how do I create something as beautiful as possible but still keep the frame rate in mind? How do I not tank performance? Because no one likes to play a game at 20 FPS or 15 FPS or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, there's also an amazing opportunity here for another niche issue. So over here, there's this cutscene here where we discover the charging station. And this is where we noticed one unique thing where I solved where at the end of our cutscenes, when we would specifically, and that's another beautiful thing I can show you with level sequence is that level sequence can also dynamically possess the character so that the character can like say like walk up to the bar and have like dynamically, like as the camera pans away from the character itself will move, and it is indeed the same like third person blueprint or whatever. Because like what I thought back in the day that everyone was doing is I was like, oh, they probably just like get the location reference of where the player is and then hide it, and then they have the cutscene version of the player running or whatever. But no, in this specific, there's a way in level sequence, and I'll show you right after this, where if I come up here, you can see Toons literally gets taken from you, and he runs up to this platform here. He goes, oh, I think I have something for this. He pulls out a little crystal, he gets charged up, and he's like, oh, I'm feeling much better now. Thank you. Oh, and that reminds me. There's usually a bunch of facial expressions on Toons, but we have to patch that for our upcoming demos and things like that. But the issue we had with this cutscene right after is when you possess the player character, we had this issue where he would remain T-posed after the cutscene until you did an action or clicked a thing or like activated a different animation within the animation blueprint. And I was like, well, why on earth is that happening? That's so strange. Like maybe we just do this strange workaround or whatever where we trigger an event after the cutscene that makes the character do a thing or whatever. But I'll show you 2-in-1. I'll show you how we rip the player third person character out of the player's hands and we get control over it. And I'll show you how we fix that. So whenever you have an animation going on your skeletal mesh, something that I don't, and a lot of people don't often think about is there is something that you add on that goes beneath the animation track called animation weight. And the funny thing is if you have that weight set to 1 and you don't turn it to 0 before the end of the cutscene, it will essentially hold on to that animation weight. And even though like the end of the cutscene tells the blueprint like, hey, go back to using your animation blueprint, right? Like let's get out of let's get out of custom mode and like let's use the animation blueprint. It just doesn't know what to do with it because the weight, I guess, conflicts with itself. So this specific issue solved an issue where after you grab control of the third person character and then end the cutscene, he's T-posing. And we're like, it took us ages to be like, why does this happen? It's clearly fine. Like he's using the animation blueprint now. So that was an interesting issue. And then to grab the blueprint third person character, the beautiful thing about it is whenever you drag in, so like let's say we have our BP person. If we bring him in, and okay, so this is a unique spawned copy of the blueprint. Whenever you drag a thing into level sequencer, it has this lightning bolt there. It says item is spawned by sequencer by custom spawnable binding according to this object spawn track. So this object of this player character only exists when the level sequence is live, and it is separate from the player character. But if you right click it, go to binding properties, and then convert binding, you see replaceable actor from director blueprint, and then quick bind. And then inside of here, it says, oh, what's this? Resolve to player pawn. Level sequencer thought that you would probably want to do something like this. So it has a very specific binding. And sure enough, you click it and boom, it literally automatically creates this thing for you that says, hey, I want the controller to be ripped away from the player, resolve it, and then just be done with it. And so now this binding on the level sequencer changed to these like blue, like swip swap left and right arrows. And this blueprint will literally just, if you come into the cutscene, it will now your blueprint third person, everything that you're doing will exist to this. And so the way that we get things looking smooth, by the way, because like that's all fine and dandy, but like you're probably wondering like, hey, you can grab the control, but like how do you like translate him from point A to point B, right? Like without him like sliding all over the place. Well, inside of the transform track, there's something pretty cool. Like in our specific circumstance, there was no problem just having him have the controls ripped from him, because basically we knew that the player was going to be crossing this threshold, and so I just had him animate to here, and there's not much room for variable here. And if the player goes to the right or to the left, a little bit of a snap into place is like, no one's really going to bat an eye. But if you wanted to, this is pretty cool. The transform track here, you can essentially go to edit track edit section, I think. Yeah, here we go. Selection, range, start, and end. If you unlock these, now this track actually has a handle, and I can pull that handle, and it's just like Adobe Premiere Pro and stuff like that with crossfade, right? This is essentially going, okay, at the beginning of the cutscene, you're still where the player character like actually was, like from beginning. But as you enter the cutscene, I want the character, you can see, because this blueprint's like way off in the middle of nowhere, right? That he just gradually over time zips you there. Very useful, very fantastic. I think Unreal actually has some tools and process to make this a little bit easier, because I saw with their Witcher demo, they were talking about like seamless cutscenes and different stuff like that or whatever. But this is the old school cool method, and it's very, very powerful to know this kind of stuff anyway, because obviously you want to do cool stuff with your cutscenes. Hell, you could even do like, I'm thinking of like Skyrim as like those execution cutscenes, right? Where you kill people in mods and stuff like that. Like there's a ton of cool stuff that you can do with binding and grabbing your player character with level sequence. Not everything that you do has to be from the blueprint, from timelines in the blueprint, from a Niagara sequence or whatever.